The black luxury sedan was sinking fast. Through the murky water of Willow Creek, Daniel Carter could see her, the same woman who had screamed at him just yesterday on that dusty country road. Victoria Langford, tech billionaire, now trapped inside a metal coffin as the current dragged her car deeper. Their eyes met through the cracked windshield. She was drowning. He had maybe 30 seconds to decide, let karma handle the woman who'd called him a backwoods nobody, or dive in. Daniel kicked off his boots. Some choices aren't really choices at all. Before we dive into this story, I'm inviting you to stick with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. Now, let's begin. The Kansas sun hung low and heavy that Friday afternoon, turning the endless cornfields into an ocean of gold. Daniel Carter's pickup truck, a 1998 Ford F-150 with more rust than paint, rattled along County Road 47 like it had been doing for the past 15 years. The engine made that familiar ticking sound that his mechanic, Old Joe, kept saying would probably be fine for another year or two. Daniel had learned to translate that into start saving for a new transmission. But today, none of that mattered. Today was Friday, which meant tomorrow was Saturday, which meant fishing with Sophie. Daniel smiled at the thought of his 6-year-old daughter, probably pressed against the living room window right now, watching for his truck. She'd been talking about their weekend trip to Willow Creek all week, ever since he'd promised to teach her how to cast with her new pink fishing rod, the one he'd saved up 3 months to buy her for her birthday. The CB radio crackled with static. Somewhere a couple of farmers were discussing the wheat harvest. Daniel reached over to turn down the volume when he noticed the cornfields on both sides of the road were getting taller, creating natural walls that blocked his view of what lay ahead. This stretch of 47 was notorious for blind curves. 3 years ago, Tommy Henderson had hit a deer right around this bend. Last summer, the Morrison kid had totaled his dad's tractor trying to take the turn too fast. Daniel eased off the gas, dropping from 45 to 30, then to 25 as the road began to curve. That's when he heard it. The scream of an engine being pushed way too hard. The high-pitched whine of expensive German engineering that didn't belong on these rural roads. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. His foot moved toward the brake, but there was no time. The black Mercedes-Benz S-Class came around the blind curve like a bullet, taking up both lanes, gravel spitting from its tires. Sunlight exploded off its pristine paint job, momentarily blinding Daniel. The luxury sedan was doing at least 60, maybe 70, on a road where the suggested speed was 35. Time did that strange thing it does in moments of crisis. Everything slowed down and sped up simultaneously. Daniel saw the driver's eyes go wide behind the windshield, saw her perfectly manicured hands jerk the wheel, saw her mouth open in shock. His instincts took over. He yanked his wheel hard right toward the shallow ditch that ran alongside the road. The Ford's right tires hit the gravel shoulder. For one terrible moment, Daniel thought he was going to flip. The truck tilted, groaned, its old suspension screaming in protest. The Mercedes swerved left, missing Daniel's driver's side door by maybe 6 inches, close enough that he could see his own reflection in her passenger window as she blew past. Both vehicles came to violent stops about 30 yards apart. Daniel's truck sat half in the ditch, engine still running, the smell of hot brakes filling the cab. His heart hammered against his ribs. His hands were shaking on the wheel. For a long moment, neither driver moved. Then Daniel heard a car door slam. He looked in his rear-view mirror and saw her stepping out of the Mercedes. Even from a distance, everything about her screamed wealth and power. Designer sunglasses that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A cream-colored blazer that fit like it had been sewn directly onto her body. Heels that made absolutely no sense on a gravel road in rural Kansas. She was walking toward him. No, she was marching toward him, and even from here Daniel could see she was angry. He took a deep breath, counted to 3, and stepped out of his truck. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road. Dust hung in the air from their near collision, creating an almost dreamlike haze. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out. The corn rustled in a gentle breeze that did nothing to cool the heat of the moment. They met in the middle of the road. Up close, she was striking. Late 30s, maybe 40, dark hair pulled back in a style that was simultaneously casual and expensive. Sharp cheekbones, eyes that were currently filled with indignation. She removed her sunglasses with a practiced gesture that somehow made it look like she was drawing a weapon. "Are you out of your mind?" Her voice was crisp, educated, with the kind of tone people use when they're accustomed to being listened to. "You were completely in my lane." Daniel blinked. "Ma'am, this is a single-lane road with a blind curve. There is no your lane. Don't ma'am me." She took a step closer, and Daniel caught a whiff of expensive perfume that smelled like it came in a bottle with a French name. "That truck of yours was taking up the entire road. I had nowhere to go." "The truck that was doing 25 in a 35 zone?" Daniel kept his voice calm, the way he'd learned to do when Sophie threw tantrums. "The truck that was completely on its side of the road until I had to swerve into a ditch to avoid you." Her eyes flashed. "I was not speeding." "Ma'am." He caught himself, saw her expression darken at the word, and corrected, "Miss, you were doing at least 60 on a road where the speed limit is 35, in a blind curve." "I know how to drive, thank you very much." She crossed her arms. "I've been driving since I was 16. Then you should know better than to take a corner like that at highway speeds." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Her jaw was set, her posture rigid with barely contained fury. But Daniel noticed something else in her eyes, a flicker of recognition that maybe, just maybe, she had been going too fast. She looked away first, her gaze sweeping over his truck. He could see her taking in the rust spots, the cracked taillight held on with duct tape, the faded bumper sticker Sophie had insisted on putting there that read, "My daughter is an honor student at Meadowbrook Elementary." When her eyes came back to his, there was something else there. Not quite contempt, but close. The look of someone who had just placed him in a box labeled insignificant. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "if you drove a vehicle from this century, you might be able to navigate these roads with more agility." Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. Not anger exactly. Something closer to disappointment. He'd seen that look before. From the bank manager who'd denied his loan application. From Sophie's mother's new husband with his corporate job and downtown condo. From people who measured worth in dollars and square footage. "My truck," Daniel said quietly, "is 26 years old. It's got 240,000 miles on it. I've replaced the engine once, the transmission twice. I know every sound it makes, every quirk it has. It's gotten me through ice storms and 100-degree summers. It's carried supplies to families who couldn't afford delivery fees. It brought my daughter home from the hospital the day she was born." He paused, letting that sink in. "So yes, it's old. Yes, it's rusty. But it's reliable. It's paid for. And it doesn't go 60 miles an hour around blind curves on country roads." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or annoyance that he'd dared to push back. "Well," she said, adjusting her blazer with a sharp tug, "I suppose we should consider ourselves fortunate that nothing worse happened." "Fortunate," Daniel repeated. "Yes, ma'am, very fortunate." "I told you not to—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "Look, I don't have time for this. I have a meeting in Wichita in 45 minutes. Are you injured? Is your truck damaged?" Daniel glanced back at his Ford, still sitting at an angle in the ditch. "I'll need to check, but it looks okay." "Fine. Then we can both be on our way." She turned to leave, and Daniel should have let her go. Should have climbed back in his truck, pulled it out of the ditch, and continued home to Sophie. Should have written this off as just another close call on a dangerous road. But something made him speak up. "You should slow down," he said. She stopped, turned back. "Excuse me?" "These roads, they're not like the highways you're probably used to. There are families out here, kids on bicycles, tractors pulling out of driveways. You can't just—" "Can't just what?" Her voice had gone cold. "Drive on public roads? Roads that I pay for, I might add, probably at a much higher tax rate than you?" Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "I wasn't talking about taxes. I was talking about safety. And I wasn't asking for a lecture from a farmer on how to drive. I'm not a farmer. I deliver agricultural supplies. And I wasn't giving a lecture. I was trying to keep someone from getting hurt." "How noble." The word dripped with sarcasm. "The local delivery man protecting his territory from outsiders. That's not what I—" "Tell me something." She took a step toward him, and despite the 4-inch heels, she suddenly seemed taller. "Do you know who I am?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. at the designer clothes and the perfect hair and the car that probably cost more than his house, at the way she held herself like someone who expected the world to rearrange itself to suit her convenience. "No, ma'am," he said finally. "I don't." For some reason, that seemed to throw her off balance more than anything else he'd said. "Victoria Langford," she said, like the name should mean something. Daniel waited. "Langford Technologies, the Langford Institute, the digital infrastructure provider for 70% of agricultural operations in the Midwest?" "Ah," Daniel nodded slowly. "You're the one buying up all the land." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm investing in the region, creating jobs, bringing technology to rural communities that desperately need it." "Right. By buying family farms and turning them into data centers. By purchasing land from people who were eager to sell." Her voice was sharp now, all pretense of politeness gone. "Land that was failing, farms that hadn't turned a profit in years. I gave those families a way out, and I paid them well for it. You paid them a fraction of what that land was worth to you. I paid them market value. It's not my fault they didn't understand the true potential of what they had." Daniel almost laughed. "The true potential? You mean the fiber optic infrastructure that was already there? The water rights, the tax incentives the county gave you?" Victoria Langford's expression had gone from annoyed to genuinely angry. "I don't know what you think you know about my business. I know the Hendersons sold you 300 acres for $200,000. A year later, you sold a 10-acre parcel to a server farm for $500,000. I know the Kowalskis sold you their property to pay for their daughter's cancer treatment because their insurance wouldn't cover it. I know—" "Enough." She held up a hand. "I've heard quite enough from you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "I didn't throw it." They stared at each other across the dusty road. The sun had dipped lower, painting everything in shades of amber and orange. In the distance, a truck rumbled along another road, the sound carrying across the flat landscape. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Daniel saw her jaw tighten even more. "I'm late," she said. "Move your truck." "You're blocking both lanes," Daniel pointed out. "I think you need to move first." For a moment, he thought she might actually argue about that too. But instead, she spun on her heel, an impressive feat in those heels on loose gravel, and stalked back to her Mercedes. Daniel watched her go, then walked back to his own truck. He climbed in, started the engine, which coughed twice before catching, and carefully backed out of the ditch. The suspension groaned, but nothing seemed broken. By the time he'd maneuvered back onto the road, Victoria had already turned her Mercedes around. She sat there waiting, engine purring smoothly, her silhouette visible through the windshield. Daniel pulled forward slowly, giving her plenty of room to pass. As she drove by, she didn't look at him, just stared straight ahead, her expression carved from ice. He watched her taillights disappear around another curve, going fast again as soon as she thought she was out of sight. Daniel shook his head and continued toward home. 10 minutes later, he pulled into the gravel driveway of his small two-bedroom house. Just as he'd predicted, Sophie was pressed against the living room window, her face lighting up the moment she saw his truck. The front door burst open before he'd even turned off the engine. "Daddy! Daddy! You're home!" Sophie came running across the lawn in her bare feet, her blonde pigtails bouncing. She launched herself at him the moment he stepped out, and Daniel caught her, lifting her up in a hug that made all the tension from the encounter on the road melt away. "Hey, Princess. How was school?" "Good. Mrs. Palmer said my reading is getting really good, and I drew a picture of us fishing, and she put it on the wall." She pulled back to look at him, her blue eyes, so much like her mother's, sparkling with excitement. "Are we still going tomorrow? To Willow Creek? You promised." "Of course we are. I never break my promises, do I?" "Never, ever." She hugged him again, then wiggled to be put down. "Come see my picture. It's got you and me and the fish and the trees and everything." As Sophie dragged him toward the house, chattering about her day, Daniel glanced back at the road. Somewhere out there, Victoria Langford was probably already in her meeting, probably already forgot about their encounter. He wondered if their paths would ever cross again. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Inside, Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who watched Sophie after school, was gathering her things. "She was good as gold," the elderly woman said. "Did all her homework, had a healthy snack." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Same time Monday?" "Wouldn't miss it. That one's my favorite part of the week." She ruffled Sophie's hair on her way out. Daniel made dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, Sophie's favorite, while his daughter sat at the kitchen table and colored. She talked non-stop, the way 6-year-olds do, jumping from topic to topic without any discernible connection. School, her best friend Emma, a butterfly she'd seen at recess, whether fish could see colors. "Daddy," she said during dinner, twirling spaghetti around her fork with intense concentration. "Why do some people have so much money and some people don't?" Daniel paused, his own fork halfway to his mouth. "That's a big question, sweetheart. Where'd that come from?" "Emma's mom got a new car. Emma said it's really expensive and her dad has a really good job." "Is your job not good?" Daniel set down his fork. "My job is very good. I help farmers get what they need to grow food. That's important work." "But we don't have a new car." "No, we don't. We have our truck, which works just fine." "Emma says old cars are for poor people." Daniel took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "Sophie, look at me. Are you happy?" She nodded. "Uh-huh." "Do you have food to eat every day?" "Yes." "A warm bed to sleep in? Clothes to wear? Toys to play with?" "Yes, Daddy." "Then we have everything we need. Some people have more things than that. Bigger houses, fancier cars. But having more things doesn't make you a better person. It just makes you a person with more things." Sophie thought about this, her young face serious. "So we're not poor? We're rich in the things that matter. We have each other. We have this house. We have Saturday fishing trips." He reached across and tapped her nose, making her giggle. "We're doing just fine, Princess." "Okay." She went back to her spaghetti, apparently satisfied with that answer. But as Daniel cleaned up after dinner, Sophie's words stuck with him. She was getting older, starting to notice things, starting to compare their life to other kids' lives. It was inevitable, he supposed. Kids were observant. He thought about Victoria Langford's Mercedes, about the way she'd looked at his truck like it was something that should be in a junkyard, about her casual mention of tax rates and market value, like money was just a tool she wielded to reshape the world to her liking. People like her didn't understand what it meant to count every dollar, to save for months for a birthday present, to fix things yourself because hiring someone wasn't in the budget, to lie awake at night wondering if you could afford the field trip fee or if you'd have to tell your daughter no, she couldn't go with her class this time. But then Daniel looked at Sophie, now in her pajamas, bringing him a book to read before bed. Her smile was genuine. Her laughter was free. She knew she was loved, absolutely and completely, and that knowledge gave her a confidence that no amount of money could buy. Victoria Langford could have her Mercedes and her tech empire and her billion-dollar land deals. Daniel had this, his daughter's hand in his as they walked to her bedroom, her excited questions about what kind of fish they might catch tomorrow, her sleepy voice asking for one more chapter. Please, just one more. He read her 3 more chapters. He always did. After Sophie fell asleep, Daniel sat on the porch with a beer, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. Tomorrow they'd go to Willow Creek. They'd fish and talk, and Sophie would probably fall in the water at least once because she always did. He'd pack sandwiches and juice boxes and her pink tackle box. They'd spend the whole day together, just the 2 of them, the way they did every Saturday when he didn't have to work. These were the moments that mattered. These were the things he was building, not a fortune, but a childhood. Not an empire, but a relationship with his daughter that would last her whole life. The beer was cold, and the night was warm, and somewhere in the fields, a whippoorwill called out its lonely song. Daniel didn't think about Victoria Langford again that night, but the universe, patient and persistent, was already setting the stage for tomorrow. In a luxury hotel room in Wichita, Victoria stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Her meeting had gone well. Another acquisition secured, another piece of infrastructure claimed. Her assistant had already sent the contracts for review. But she couldn't stop thinking about that farmer, no, delivery man, on the dusty road. The way he'd looked at her truck, the way he'd pushed back against her, the way he'd seemed completely unmoved by who she was. Most people, when they learned her name, shifted, became either deferential or opportunistic. They wanted something, a job, an investment, a connection. They saw her as a means to an end. That man had just seen her as someone driving too fast. Victoria finished her wine and set the glass down harder than necessary. Tomorrow, she'd be heading to the rural properties she'd acquired, inspecting the sites, meeting with engineers. She'd be back in that area, driving those same roads. She'd slow down, she decided, not because of what he'd said, but because it made practical sense. An accident would be inconvenient. That's what she told herself anyway. Neither of them could have known that in less than 24 hours, their paths wouldn't just cross again. They'd collide in a way that would change everything. The night deepened. Stars emerged. And somewhere between the city and the cornfields, fate quietly shuffled its deck, preparing to deal a hand that neither of them expected. Tomorrow would start like any other Saturday. Daniel and Sophie would pack their fishing gear. Victoria would review her acquisition maps. The sun would rise over Kansas like it always did. And by tomorrow afternoon, one of them would owe the other a debt that money couldn't pay. But tonight, they both slept, unaware. The creek flowed on toward morning. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect clarity that only early summer could deliver. Daniel woke before his alarm, the way he always did on fishing days, and lay in bed for a moment listening to the birds outside his window. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the hallway clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. He was halfway through his first cup of coffee when he heard Sophie's door creak open. Small feet padded down the hallway, and then she appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild tangle around her face. "Is it time?" she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might somehow cancel the trip. Daniel smiled over the rim of his mug. "Almost. Go get dressed. Wear your old jeans and your sneakers, not the sandals." "The ones with the butterflies?" "Those are sandals, princess, but they're my fishing shoes." "They're sandals. You'll slip on the rocks. Sneakers." Sophie groaned dramatically but disappeared back down the hallway. Daniel heard her rummaging around in her room, talking to herself the way she always did when she was excited. He finished his coffee and started packing their lunch. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, apple slices, a bag of pretzels, 2 juice boxes, and a thermos of lemonade. He added a couple of cookies from the jar Mrs. Chen had brought over earlier in the week. By the time Sophie reappeared, in jeans and sneakers, her hair now pulled into a slightly crooked ponytail, Daniel had the cooler packed and their fishing gear loaded in the truck bed. Her pink rod and tackle box sat next to his battered old equipment that had belonged to his father. "Can I bring Mr. Whiskers?" Sophie held up a stuffed cat that was missing one eye and had seen better days. "Mr. Whiskers doesn't like fishing." "Yes, he does. He told me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "He told you?" "In my head. He said he wants to come." "All right, but if he falls in the creek, we're not going in after him." "Deal!" Sophie clutched the cat to her chest and climbed into the truck. The drive to Willow Creek took about 20 minutes, winding through farmland that was just starting to show the green promise of the growing season. Sophie chattered the entire way, asking questions that ranged from reasonable to completely absurd. "Daddy, do fish sleep?" "Yes, but not like we do." "Do they dream?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I think they dream about being big, like really, really big, like whale big." "That's a nice thought." "Daddy, if you were a fish, what kind would you be?" Daniel considered this seriously. "Maybe a catfish. They're tough, they stick around, and they're good at finding food even in murky water." "I'd be a rainbow fish with all the sparkly scales." "That fits you perfectly." They pulled off the main road onto a narrow dirt path that most people didn't know about. Daniel had been coming to this spot since he was younger than Sophie, first with his own father, then alone after the old man passed, and now with his daughter. It was a quiet bend in the creek where the willows grew thick and the water ran clear over smooth stones. There were no other cars when they arrived, which was exactly how Daniel liked it. "Okay, grab your tackle box," he said, shouldering the cooler and his own gear. "Watch your step on the slope." They made their way down the gentle bank to the water's edge. The creek gurgled and whispered, sunlight dancing on its surface. Willows draped their long fingers toward the water, creating pockets of cool shade. Daniel could already hear the insects starting their morning chorus. He helped Sophie set up her rod first, showing her again how to tie the hook properly. Loop it around twice, then through the hole, then pull tight. "See?" Sophie's tongue stuck out in concentration as she tried to mimic his movements. It took 3 attempts, but she got it. "Good job, princess. Now, what did I teach you about casting?" "Check behind me first. Make sure nobody's there. Then pull back slow and push forward fast." And don't hook Daddy in the face. That's the most important rule. Daniel grinned and helped her bait the hook with a worm from the container he'd dug that morning. Sophie squealed and made a face, but bravely held the squirming creature between her fingers. They're slimy! Yep, fish love 'em though. Sophie made her first cast. The line landed with a small plop about 10 feet from shore. Not perfect, but not bad for a 6-year-old. Now we wait, Daniel said, setting up his own rod. Patience is the secret to fishing. Patience is boring, Sophie announced, but she kept her eyes on her bobber, watching it drift on the gentle current. For a while they sat in comfortable silence. Daniel found himself relaxing in a way he only could out here, away from bills and responsibilities and the constant mental math of making ends meet. The sun climbed higher. Birds called from the trees. Somewhere upstream, a bullfrog offered its deep commentary. Sophie caught the first fish, a small bluegill that put up a respectable fight. She shrieked with delight when it broke the surface, and Daniel helped her reel it in. I got one! I got one! Did you see, Daddy? I saw! That's a beauty! It wasn't really. It was barely bigger than Daniel's hand, but the joy on Sophie's face made it seem like she'd landed a trophy base. He showed her how to remove the hook carefully, how to hold the fish so it wouldn't get hurt, and then helped her lower it back into the water. Why aren't we keeping it? Because we're fishing for fun, not for dinner. We let them go so they can get bigger and we can catch them again another day. Oh, okay. Bye, fishy. Get big. They fished for another hour. Sophie caught 2 more bluegills and lost count of how many times her bobber went under without her catching anything. Daniel caught a decent-sized catfish and released it, feeling oddly pleased with himself even though he'd been fishing this creek for 30 years. Around mid-morning, they took a break for snacks. Sophie sat on a flat rock with Mr. Whiskers beside her, eating her sandwich and telling the stuffed cat all about the fish she'd caught, with significant embellishment to the story. And it was huge, Mr. Whiskers, like this big. She spread her arms wide. And it fought and fought, but I was stronger. Daniel leaned against a tree trunk, drinking lemonade from the thermos cap, watching his daughter with a contentment that ran bone deep. These moments, these simple, perfect moments, were what life was really about. Not money or status or impressing anyone, just a father and daughter and a quiet creek on a Saturday morning. He was about to suggest they try a different spot upstream when he heard it. An engine. Approaching fast, Daniel's head snapped up. The sound was coming from the old wooden bridge that crossed Willow Creek about 200 yards upstream. The bridge was narrow, built 40 years ago for tractors and pickup trucks, not high-speed traffic. There were warning signs posted on both sides. 15 miles per hour, narrow bridge, proceed with caution. The engine sound grew louder, angrier. Daniel stood up, shading his eyes. Through the trees, he could just make out the bridge. Sunlight glinted off something black and shiny. His stomach dropped. Sophie, stay here with Mr. Whiskers. But, Daddy, stay here. Don't move. He started walking upstream, his pace quickening with each step. The engine sound peaked, too fast, way too fast, and then he heard the squeal of tires on old wood. Then a crash. Then silence. Then a splash that made Daniel break into a run. By the time he reached the bridge, his heart was hammering, and his boots were pounding the soft earth of the creek bank. He burst through the willows and stopped, breathing hard, taking in the scene. The bridge's wooden railing was shattered. Fresh tire marks scarred the old planks. And in the creek, already 20 feet downstream from where it had entered the water, a black Mercedes S-Class was sinking. The same black Mercedes from yesterday. For one frozen moment, Daniel couldn't move. His mind was racing through options, calculating angles, assessing danger. The creek was running higher than usual from the spring rains. The current was strong. The car was already nose down, water pouring through the broken windshield. Then he saw movement inside. Saw her. Victoria Langford was trapped in the driver's seat, fighting with the door, her face pressed against the window as water rushed into the vehicle. Their eyes met across the distance. Even through the cracked glass, he could see the panic in her expression. The car tilted further. In seconds, it would be completely submerged. Daniel didn't think. Didn't weigh the irony of saving the woman who'd called his truck outdated and his life insignificant. Didn't consider that she probably wouldn't do the same for him. He just kicked off his boots and ran into the water. The cold hit him like a fist, Spring runoff always ran colder than people expected, fed by snowmelt from somewhere far north. Daniel gasped but kept moving, his feet finding purchase on the rocky bottom. The current pushed at him, trying to knock him off balance. The Mercedes was sinking fast, already half submerged. Water was pouring through every opening, the windshield, the seams around the doors. The car rocked and shifted in the current, and for a terrible moment Daniel thought it might roll completely. He reached the driver's side door and pulled. Nothing. Locked. "The lock!" he shouted. "Unlock the door!" Victoria's face appeared in the window, pale and terrified. Water was up to her chest inside the car. She was trying to say something, but he couldn't hear her. Her hands fumbled with something below the waterline. Click. The door unlocked. Daniel grabbed the handle and pulled with everything he had. The water pressure was fighting him, the weight of the flooding vehicle working against every ounce of strength he possessed. His muscles screamed. His feet slipped on the rocks. The current was trying to drag both him and the car downstream. The door moved an inch, 2 inches. "Come on!" Daniel gritted his teeth and pulled harder, bracing his feet against the car's body. The door opened another few inches, just enough for water to start equalizing the pressure, just enough for a hand to reach through. Victoria's hand found his. Her fingers locked around his wrist with desperate strength. "I've got you," Daniel shouted. "When I pull the door open, you push out. Ready?" She nodded, water up to her chin now. 1, 2, 3. Daniel yanked the door open. Victoria pushed with her legs, fighting against the water that wanted to pin her inside. For a horrible second, she was stuck. Her seatbelt, Daniel realized. She was still buckled in. "The belt! Unbuckle!" Her free hand disappeared below the water. He saw her face contort with effort and fear and frustration. The car lurched, settling deeper. Water covered her mouth. Then she was free. Daniel pulled her through the opening as the Mercedes gave up its fight and slipped beneath the surface. The current caught them both immediately, tumbling them downstream. Victoria's weight dragged at him. His lungs burned. Rocks scraped his legs and arms. He fought toward the bank, one arm wrapped around Victoria, the other trying to grab at anything that might slow them down. His hand caught a submerged tree root. He gripped it hard enough that he felt the skin tear on his palm, but he held on. The current pulled at them like it had hands, like it wanted them for itself. Victoria coughed and choked, clinging to him. Daniel's muscles were screaming, his vision starting to gray at the edges from the effort. "Kick!" he gasped. "Help me!" "Kick toward the bank." She did. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Together, they fought the water. Inch by impossible inch, Daniel pulled them toward the shore, using the root as an anchor, his feet scrabbling for purchase. His boot hit something solid, a rock. He pushed off it, lunged forward, and suddenly they were in shallower water. The current was still strong, but manageable. He half dragged, half carried Victoria the last few feet to the bank. They collapsed onto the grass, both of them coughing and gasping. Water streamed from their clothes. Daniel's chest heaved like a bellows. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been stretched beyond its limit. For a long moment, neither of them could speak. Daniel rolled onto his back, staring up at the sky through the willow branches. His heart was still racing. His hands were shaking. He became aware of pain, his torn palm, scrapes on his arms and legs, a sharp ache in his ribs where something had hit him. Beside him, Victoria was curled on her side, coughing up water. Her perfect hair hung in wet tangles around her face. Her expensive blazer was torn and muddy. She was shaking, whether from cold or shock, Daniel couldn't tell. Probably both. Downstream, about 50 yards away, he could see Sophie standing at the edge of the trees, mister. Whiskers clutched to her chest, her eyes wide. "It's okay," Daniel called to her, his voice rough. "Stay there, princess. I'm okay." He sat up slowly, wincing. Everything hurt. He looked at Victoria, who was now sitting up as well, her arms wrapped around herself. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, then stopped, checking herself as if surprised to find all her parts still attached. I don't think so. I don't know. I can't." Her voice was shaking as badly as her hands. "Take slow breaths. You're safe. You're out." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Daniel saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her eyes widened. "You," she whispered. "Yeah. Me. From yesterday, The road. The very same. You saved my life. She said it like she couldn't quite believe it, like the concept didn't make sense. Daniel shrugged, which sent a fresh wave of pain through his shoulder. Couldn't just let you drown. But yesterday, I was terrible to you. You were pretty rude, Daniel agreed. Still didn't deserve to drown for it. A laugh escaped her, a slightly hysterical sound that was part sob. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her whole body shaking harder now. Shock, Daniel realized. She was going into shock. He moved closer, ignoring the protests from his own body. Hey, look at me. You're okay. You're safe. Take deep breaths with me. In and out, out. In and out. She tried to follow his breathing, her eyes locked on his. Gradually, the shaking eased a little. What happened? Daniel asked gently. How did you end up in the creek? Victoria closed her eyes. I was driving too fast. Again. I know. You don't have to say it. The bridge was narrower than I thought. I tried to slow down, but the wood was slippery, and the car just went straight through the railing. She opened her eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. I thought I was going to die. The water came in so fast, the doors wouldn't open. I couldn't. But you did, Daniel said firmly. You're here. You're alive. Because of you. The tears spilled over. You came in after me, even after yesterday, even after the things I said. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just sat there on the wet grass, dripping and hurting and trying to process what had just happened. Sophie's voice carried across the distance. Daddy? Can I come now? Yeah, princess, come here. She ran over, still clutching Mr. Whiskers, and threw herself at Daniel. He caught her, hugging her tight despite the pain it caused. You scared me. Sophie's voice was muffled against his wet shirt. You ran away, and then there was a crash, and then you were in the water, and I know. I'm sorry. But I'm okay. See? I'm okay. Sophie pulled back and looked at Victoria with open curiosity. Who's that? This is... Daniel hesitated. This is Victoria. Her car went into the creek. I helped her get out. Oh. Sophie studied Victoria with the frank assessment only children can pull off. You look really wet. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. A real laugh this time. I am very wet. Did you go swimming in your clothes? Not on purpose. That's silly. Daddy says we always change into swimsuits first. Your daddy's right. Victoria wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheek. You should always listen to him. He's a very smart man. Sophie beamed at that. I know. He's the smartest daddy ever. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He stood up carefully, helping Victoria to her feet as well. She swayed slightly, and he kept a hand on her elbow until she steadied. We should get you checked out, he said. Make sure you're really okay. There's a medical center in town, about 15 minutes from here. I'm fine, really. You drove a car into a creek and almost drowned. You need to get checked out. I said I'm fine. Her voice had a slight edge to it, the return of the Victoria from yesterday, but it faded quickly. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be difficult. I don't like doctors. Nobody likes doctors, but we're going anyway. Can you walk? She nodded. Together, with Sophie holding Mr. Whiskers and asking a steady stream of questions that neither adult was really answering, they made their way back to where Daniel's truck was parked. What about your car? Sophie asked Victoria. Is it still in the water? Yes, it is. Won't it get eaten by fish? I don't think fish eat cars, sweetheart. Really big fish might, like whale fish or shark fish. There are no whales or sharks in the creek, Daniel said. He helped Victoria into the passenger seat of his truck, then loaded Sophie and their fishing gear into the back. As he drove toward town, Victoria sat in silence, staring at her hands. Daniel noticed they were still shaking slightly. He turned up the heat even though it was a warm day and reached behind his seat to grab the old flannel shirt he kept there. Here, you're still cold. Victoria took the shirt without argument and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was about 3 sizes too big and smelled like motor oil in the outdoors. She pulled it tight anyway. They drove past the scene of yesterday's near collision. Neither of them mentioned it. The medical center was quiet on a Saturday morning. The nurse on duty took one look at Victoria, wet, muddy, shaking, and immediately brought her back. Daniel sat in the waiting room with Sophie, who had found a box of toys in the corner and was now making Mr. Whiskers have an adventure with a plastic dinosaur. 20 minutes later, Victoria emerged with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a bandage on her hand. "Clean bill of health," she announced. "Minor cuts and bruises. They said I was lucky." "You were," Daniel agreed. She sat down in the chair next to him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sophie's voice provided a running commentary to Mr. Whiskers' dinosaur battle. "I don't know how to thank you," Victoria said finally. "I don't even know your name." "Daniel. Daniel Carter." "Daniel." She tested the name. "I owe you my life, Daniel Carter." "You don't owe me anything." "I disagree." She turned to face him fully. "I've spent my whole life in a world where everything is transactional. Everything has a price, a value, a ledger entry. But this, what you did, there's no transaction that covers it. No payment that would be adequate. Then don't try to pay me. I didn't do it for money." "Then why did you do it?" She seemed genuinely puzzled. "After how I treated you yesterday?" Daniel thought about that. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because you were in trouble and I could help. Because," he glanced at Sophie, "because I want my daughter to grow up knowing that you help people when they need it, even if they haven't been nice to you. Especially then." Victoria followed his gaze to Sophie, who was now making the dinosaur roar at Mr. Whiskers. Something shifted in her expression, softened. "She's beautiful," Victoria said quietly. "How old?" 6, just turned 6 last month. "And her mother?" "Not in the picture. Left when Sophie was 18 months old. Decided motherhood wasn't for her." "I'm sorry," Daniel shrugged. "We're doing fine. There's just the two of us." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I meant what I said yesterday, about not knowing who you were. I should have said, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you, for what I implied about your truck, your life. I was rude and condescending and you didn't deserve that." "No, I didn't." The blunt agreement seemed to surprise her. She almost smiled. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" "Why should I?" "Fair point." She pulled the flannel shirt tighter around her shoulders. "For what it's worth, I was already planning to slow down. On those roads. You were right about that." "Good. And about the land deals, the farms. I hadn't thought about it the way you described it, about the families. I just saw the business opportunity." "That's the problem with people like you," Daniel said, not unkindly. "You see opportunities, not people." Victoria flinched like he'd hit her, but she didn't argue. Sophie abandoned her toys and came over, climbing into Daniel's lap. "Daddy, I'm hungry." He checked his watch. "Nearly noon." "Yeah, I bet you are. We should probably get going." He stood, settling Sophie on his hip. Victoria stood as well, the medical center blanket still wrapped around her. "I don't have a car," she said suddenly. "Or my phone. Everything was in the Mercedes. I need to call someone, arrange for a rental, get back to my hotel." "Where are you staying?" "The Wichita Grand. But that's an hour away. I can call a car service. Phone's in my truck," Daniel said. "You can use it." They walked out to the parking lot together. Daniel set Sophie in the truck, gave Victoria his phone, and stepped away to give her privacy. He watched her pace back and forth, making calls. First to someone about the car, insurance, probably. Then to her hotel. Then to what sounded like an assistant, her voice taking on a crisp, professional tone that was worlds away from the shaken woman who'd almost drowned an hour ago. She handed the phone back to him. "Thank you. I've arranged for a car to pick me up. Should be here in about 30 minutes. We can wait with you." "You don't have to do that." "I know." They sat on the tailgate of his truck, Sophie between them, swinging her legs and humming to herself. The sun was warm now, drying their clothes in patches. In the distance, Daniel could hear the normal sounds of a Saturday in town. Lawnmowers, car engines, someone's radio playing country music. "This is a nice town," Victoria said after a while. "I've driven through it a dozen times, but never really stopped." "It's home," Daniel said simply. "Do you like it, living here?" "Why wouldn't I?" "I don't know, it's so small, quiet. Don't you ever want more?" Daniel looked at Sophie, then back at Victoria. More of what? She didn't have an answer for that. A sleek black town car pulled into the lot 30 minutes later. Victoria stood, shrugged off the flannel shirt, and handed it back to Daniel. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving my life, for the ride, for not letting me make excuses." "Take care of yourself," Daniel said, "and slow down on those roads." "I will." She started toward the town car, then stopped and turned back. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "I meant what I said. I owe you. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you can find me. Langford Technologies. Anyone there can reach me." Daniel nodded, though they both knew he'd never call. They watched the town car drive away. Sophie waved enthusiastically, even though Victoria probably couldn't see her through the tinted windows. "Are we still fishing?" Sophie asked. Daniel laughed. "Yeah, princess, we're still fishing. Let's go catch a few more before we head home." They drove back to Willow Creek. The broken bridge railing stood as testament to what had happened, and somewhere beneath the water's surface, an expensive German sedan was settling into the creek bed. The county would probably send someone to pull it out on Monday. But for now, Daniel and Sophie returned to their spot under the willows. They cast their lines and sat in the dappled sunlight, and Sophie caught 2 more bluegills while Daniel caught nothing but didn't mind at all. Later, driving home with Sophie asleep in the passenger seat and Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, Daniel thought about Victoria Langford, about the way she'd looked at his truck yesterday with contempt, and the way she'd looked at him today with gratitude, about how quickly circumstances could change, how fragile life really was. He thought about her offer, "If you ever need anything," and knew with absolute certainty that he'd never take her up on it. Their worlds were too different. Today had been an accident, a strange crossing of paths that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. By tomorrow, she'd be back in her world of technology and business deals, and he'd be back in his world of delivery routes and Saturday fishing trips. Their paths wouldn't cross again. That's what he told himself as he carried Sophie inside and tucked her into bed for her afternoon nap. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Daniel figured that would be the end of it. A strange chapter closed, a story to maybe tell Sophie when she was older, the time her dad pulled a billionaire out of Willow Creek. He spent Sunday doing laundry and fixing the loose board on the porch steps that he'd been meaning to get to for 3 weeks. Sophie helped by handing him nails and asking if they could go fishing again next Saturday. Monday morning started like any other. Daniel was up at 5:30, coffee brewing before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. He had a full route today, deliveries to 3 farms in the North County, then a pickup at the feed store in Millbrook. He left Sophie with Mrs. Chen, kissed the top of her head, and promised he'd be home by dinner. The day unfolded in its familiar rhythm. Farmers who paid in cash and conversation, dusty driveways and barking dogs. The satisfaction of crossing items off his delivery manifest. By 4 o'clock, Daniel was heading home, his truck lighter without the cargo, his mind already on what to make for dinner. He pulled into his driveway and stopped. A sleek black rental car, not as expensive as the Mercedes, but still clearly out of place in his neighborhood, sat parked in front of his house. And standing on his porch, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly composed, was Victoria Langford. She'd traded the torn blazer for a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked almost normal, if normal could be worth several $billion. Daniel sat in his truck for a moment, hands still on the wheel, trying to figure out what this meant. Then he sighed, grabbed his thermos, and climbed out. Victoria turned at the sound of his door closing. She had bags in her hands, expensive-looking bags from stores that definitely weren't in this town. "Hi," she said, and there was uncertainty in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I hope this isn't... I probably should have called first." "Don't have my number," Daniel pointed out, walking up the porch steps. "I could have found it. I'm good at finding information." "I bet you are." He unlocked the front door. "What are you doing here, Victoria?" "I wanted to thank you properly. For Saturday, I brought some things." "You already thanked me." "I said words. That's not the same as actually expressing gratitude." She held up the bags. "I brought dinner from that Italian place in Wichita. And some things for Sophie. I hope that's okay. I didn't know what she liked, so I got a few different options." Daniel looked at the bags, then at Victoria, then back at the bags. "You drove an hour to bring me Italian food? Is that weird? It feels weird now that I'm saying it out loud. I can go." This was a bad idea. She started to turn away. Wait. The word came out before Daniel could think better of it. You're already here. Might as well come in. Relief flashed across her face. Are you sure? No, but come in anyway. The house was exactly as Daniel had left it that morning. Breakfast dishes in the sink, Sophie's art project spread across the kitchen table, the lingering smell of coffee and toast. It was small and lived in and probably worth less than Victoria's car. Daniel watched her take it in, waiting for that look he'd seen on Saturday, the judgment, the dismissal. But it didn't come. Instead, she seemed curious, her eyes moving over the photos on the walls, the child's drawings held to the refrigerator with magnets, the worn but comfortable furniture. This is nice, she said, and she sounded like she meant it. It feels like a home. It is a home, that's kind of the point. Daniel set his thermos on the counter. Let me call Mrs. Chen, tell her I'm back. 5 minutes later, Sophie came bursting through the door like a small hurricane, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She stopped dead when she saw Victoria. You're the lady from the creek. Victoria smiled. I am. Hi, Sophie. Your dad told me it was your birthday recently. I brought you some presents. I hope that's okay. Sophie's eyes went wide. She looked at Daniel for permission. He nodded, and she was across the room in a heartbeat, peering into the bags Victoria set down. Inside were books, beautiful hardcover editions of fairy tales and adventure stories, a set of art supplies in a wooden case, a stuffed animal, a rabbit with impossibly soft fur, and at the bottom, a pink tackle box filled with new fishing lures. Daddy, look! Sophie held up the tackle box like she'd found buried treasure. It has the spinny ones, the ones that look like real fish. Those are called spinners, Victoria said. The man at the store said they're good for catching bass. Sophie beamed at her. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around Victoria's waist in a hug that nearly knocked the woman over. Thank you, thank you, thank you. These are the best presents ever. Victoria's hands hovered uncertainly before settling on Sophie's shoulders. She looked at Daniel over his daughter's head with an expression he couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. You're very welcome, Victoria said quietly. Sophie pulled back and immediately started organizing her new lures in the tackle box, narrating her decisions to Mr. Whiskers, who was apparently supervising the process. Daniel walked over to the bags of food. You really brought dinner? Chicken parmesan, fettuccine alfredo, Caesar salad, and breadsticks. Too much, probably. I wasn't sure what you liked. Sophie loves pasta. He started unpacking the containers. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Victoria stood awkwardly in the middle of the kitchen, like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands. Can I help? You know how to set a table? I think I can manage. They worked in surprisingly comfortable silence. Daniel pulled out plates and glasses while Victoria found the silverware after only 2 wrong drawers. Sophie continued her organizational project at the kitchen table, which Daniel gently relocated to the counter so they'd have space to eat. Dinner was strange and ordinary at the same time. Sophie dominated the conversation, telling Victoria about school and her best friend Emma and the butterflies she'd seen and a dozen other topics that only made sense to a 6-year-old. Victoria listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's jokes. And then Mr. Patterson's tractor got stuck in the mud, and Daddy had to help pull it out with his truck, and it took forever. And I was so bored waiting, but then we got ice cream after, so it was okay. That sounds like quite an adventure, Victoria said. Daddy says adventures are just regular things that you pay attention to. Victoria glanced at Daniel. Is that so? He shrugged. Something my dad used to say. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Victoria her room, dragging her by the hand down the hallway. Daniel cleaned up, listening to Sophie's voice echoing from the bedroom, explaining the significance of every drawing on her walls and the story behind each stuffed animal. When they emerged 20 minutes later, Sophie was yawning and Victoria looked slightly overwhelmed. Bath time, princess, Daniel said. Say thank you to Victoria for the presents. Thank you. Sophie hugged Victoria again. Will you come back? Victoria hesitated, her eyes finding Daniel's. I don't know, sweetheart. Please, you could come fishing with us. Daddy's teaching me how to use the spinny things, the spinners, and you could learn too. Sophie, Daniel said gently, Victoria's busy. She has important work to do. Not this Saturday, Victoria said suddenly. I could, if it's okay with your dad, I could come fishing this Saturday. Sophie squealed and bounced on her toes. Daddy, can she? Please? Daniel looked at Victoria, trying to figure out what was happening here. She looked back at him with something that might have been hope or might have been challenge. He couldn't tell which. We leave at 8, he heard himself say. We're usually out there most of the day. I'll be here at 7:50, Victoria said, after Sophie's bath, after she was tucked into bed with Mr. Whiskers and the new rabbit she'd already named Rosie. Daniel walked Victoria out to her car. The evening air was cool and smelled like honeysuckle from Mrs. Chen's garden next door. You don't have to come on Saturday, Daniel said. She'll forget by tomorrow. She won't forget, and I want to come. Victoria leaned against her car. Unless you don't want me to. I don't understand what you're doing here. Neither do I, honestly. She looked up at the stars just beginning to appear. I went back to Wichita after Saturday. Went to my hotel, took a shower, put on clean clothes. Tried to go back to normal. But I kept thinking about you, about what you said, that I see opportunities instead of people. Victoria, let me finish. She took a breath. I've spent 15 years building my company, making money, making deals. I've been successful by every metric that matters in my world. But Saturday, when that car was filling with water and I thought I was going to die, you know what I thought about? Daniel waited. Nothing. I had nothing. No one I'd miss. No one who'd really miss me. Just business associates and employees and people who know my name but not me. And then you pulled me out, and I saw you with Sophie, and I saw what you have, and she trailed off. I know how this sounds. I know I'm probably just having some kind of crisis reaction to a near-death experience. But I want to understand. I want to understand how you can have so little and seem so content. I don't have so little, Daniel said quietly. I have everything that matters. Teach me. The words came out almost desperate. Teach me how to see it that way. Daniel studied her in the dim light from his porch. This woman who'd almost died in his creek, who'd insulted him on a dusty road and then sat at his kitchen table eating dinner with his daughter, who was now asking him for something he wasn't sure he knew how to give. Saturday, he said finally. 7:50, wear old clothes, shoes that can get wet. I'll be here. She was. Saturday morning, 7:49, Victoria's rental car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out wearing jeans that still had creases from the store and a plain white t-shirt that probably cost more than Daniel's entire outfit. But she'd clearly tried, and Sophie was thrilled. You came, Daddy! She came! I promised, didn't I? Victoria smiled. She had a travel mug of coffee in one hand and looked nervous. They loaded into Daniel's truck, Sophie in the middle, chattering excitedly, Victoria by the window looking like she'd never ridden in a vehicle this old in her life. The drive to Willow Creek was filled with Sophie's endless stream of questions. Do you like fishing? I've never been fishing. Never ever? Never ever. That's so sad. Daddy, that's so sad. She's never been fishing. I heard, Princess. Don't worry, I'll teach you everything. First, you gotta check behind you before you cast. That's the most important rule because otherwise you hook someone in the face and that's really bad. Victoria caught Daniel's eye over Sophie's head. He tried not to smile. At the creek, Daniel set up Victoria's rod, borrowed from old Joe who had extra equipment, while Sophie supervised and offered advice that ranged from helpful to completely absurd. Okay, Daniel said, handing Victoria the rod. Ever thrown a ball? Yes, I can throw a ball. It's similar. Pull back, then forward. Let the momentum do the work. Don't muscle it. Victoria's first cast went about 6 feet and landed in a tree branch. Sophie giggled. That's okay. Daddy's first cast today went in a bush. It did not, Daniel protested. It did. I saw it. They spent the next hour untangling lines, recasting, and teaching Victoria the basics. She was terrible at it. She got frustrated easily. But she kept trying, and Daniel found himself impressed by her persistence. I run a billion-dollar company, Victoria muttered after her 5th failed cast. I negotiate international contracts. I can't catch a fish. You're thinking too hard, Daniel said. It's not a business deal. It's just fishing. Just fishing, she repeated, like the concept was foreign. Sophie caught 3 fish in the first hour. Victoria caught nothing but seemed oddly happy about it anyway. They broke for lunch around noon, sandwiches and chips and lemonade, sitting on the bank with their feet dangling near the water. "This is nice," Victoria said softly. "Just being here, not doing anything important." "It is important," Sophie said seriously. "We're making memories. Daddy says that's the most important thing." Victoria looked at Daniel. "Smart daddy." "He tries." The afternoon unfolded in easy contentment. Victoria finally caught a fish, a tiny bluegill that Sophie declared was perfect and beautiful, and you should name it. Name it? Yeah, before we let it go, you have to name it so it knows it's special. George? That's a good name? Bye, George. Get big. They fished until the shadows grew long and Sophie started yawning. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep between them, her head on Victoria's shoulder. Victoria looked down at the sleeping child with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. At the house, Daniel carried Sophie inside while Victoria gathered their gear. When he came back out, she was standing by her car, tackle box in hand. "Keep it," Daniel said, "in case you come again." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She smiled. "Same time next Saturday?" And somehow it became a routine. Victoria came the next Saturday. And the one after that? At first it was just fishing trips, but gradually she started arriving earlier, staying later. She'd show up on Friday evenings with dinner. She'd come by on Tuesday afternoons just to sit on the porch and talk while Sophie did homework. "Don't you have work?" Daniel asked once. "I do. I've been delegating more, trusting my team. Turns out the company runs fine without me micromanaging every decision." She started bringing more practical things instead of expensive gifts. A tool to fix Daniel's leaking faucet. Groceries when she noticed the fridge was getting empty. Books from Sophie's summer reading list. "You don't have to keep doing this," Daniel said one evening after Sophie had gone to bed and they were sitting on the porch with beers, watching fireflies. "I know. I want to." "Why?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm part of something real. Not a business, not a deal, just people. A family." "We're not your family, Victoria." "I know." She looked at him. "But I wish you were." The air between them shifted. Daniel felt it, that pull he'd been trying to ignore for weeks now. The way his heart sped up when her car pulled into the driveway. The way Sophie's face lit up when Victoria arrived. The way his house felt emptier on the days she didn't come. "This is complicated," he said quietly. "I know." "You live in a completely different world." "I know that too." Sophie's already getting attached. If this ends badly, I won't let it end badly. Victoria set down her beer. "Daniel, I'm not good at this. At relationships, at being part of someone's life, but I want to try. I want to be here." "For how long?" "As long as you'll let me." Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the billionaire who'd nearly run him off the road. Not the woman he'd pulled from a sinking car. Just Victoria, who laughed at Sophie's terrible jokes and wasn't afraid to bait her own hooks and sat on his old porch furniture like it was exactly where she wanted to be. "You realize this town is going to talk," he said, "about you spending time here with me. Let them talk. I'm serious. Small towns have long memories and longer gossip chains. I don't care what they say. You will when they start asking questions. When they wonder what a woman like you is doing with a guy like me." Victoria's expression hardened. "A woman like me? What does that mean?" "You know what it means." "No, I don't. Tell me." Daniel gestured between them. "Rich, successful. You could have anyone. Why would you want to spend your time here, in this tiny house, with a delivery driver and his kid?" Victoria stood up. For a moment, Daniel thought she was going to leave, thought he'd finally pushed too hard. But instead, she moved to stand in front of him, her eyes fierce. "You want to know why? Because you're the first person in 10 years who treated me like a human being instead of a bank account. Because Sophie looks at me like I matter, not like I'm a networking opportunity. Because sitting on this porch drinking cheap beer is more satisfying than any 5-star restaurant I've been to." Her voice softened. "Because you saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to be grateful I survived." Daniel stood too, and suddenly they were very close. He could smell her shampoo. Something simple now, not the expensive perfume from that first day. Could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Victoria, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, she said. I just want to be here, to be part of this. Whatever this is. This is my life. This is all I have. It's enough. She reached out, her fingers barely touching his arm. You're enough. The words hung in the summer air between them, heavy with possibility and risk and the kind of vulnerability that terrified them both. Sophie's voice called from inside. Daddy, I had a bad dream. The moment broke. Daniel stepped back. I should go. I'll see myself out. Victoria, go take care of your daughter, Daniel. That's what makes you who you are. He went inside to comfort Sophie, who dreamed about fish that were too big and water that was too deep. When he came back out 15 minutes later, Victoria's car was gone, but on the porch railing, she'd left her tackle box. The next Friday, she came back, and the Friday after that, and somehow, without either of them quite meaning for it to happen, Victoria Langford became part of the rhythm of their lives. She learned Sophie's favorite bedtime stories. She figured out which drawer had the silverware. She showed up at Sophie's school play and sat in the audience next to Mrs. Chen, cheering louder than anyone when Sophie played Tree Number 3. The town did talk, of course. Daniel heard the whispers at the feed store, saw the curious looks when they walked through town together. Mrs. Henderson asked pointed questions. Old Joe made suggestive comments that Daniel ignored, but Sophie was happier than Daniel had ever seen her, and Victoria seemed lighter somehow, like some weight she'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. One evening in late July, Daniel came home to find Victoria in his kitchen, flour on her nose, helping Sophie make cookies. The radio was playing old country songs. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter. Sophie was giggling at something Victoria had said. Daniel stopped in the doorway, and his heart did something complicated in his chest. Victoria looked up and smiled. Hey, we're making snickerdoodles. Sophie's teaching me. You're doing it wrong, Sophie said cheerfully. You have to roll them in the cinnamon sugar like this, see? I see. Like this? Better. Daniel set down his keys and walked into the kitchen, into the warmth and the laughter and the simple domestic joy of it all. Victoria had flour on her sleeve. Sophie had cookie dough on her chin. The kitchen was a mess. It was perfect. Save some dough for me, Daniel said. I'm the best cookie maker in this house. You are not, Sophie protested. Am too. I have scientific evidence. What evidence? You keep eating them, so they must be good. Sophie giggled. Victoria laughed, and Daniel felt something click into place, something that had been slowly building for weeks, something he'd been afraid to name. This wasn't just Victoria visiting anymore. This wasn't just a billionaire trying to understand a different life. This was family. That night, after the cookies were made and eaten and Sophie was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the porch again. The conversation had become easier over the weeks, flowing naturally between serious and silly, deep and shallow. I talked to my board this week, Victoria said. Told them I'm relocating my primary residence. Daniel's heart stuttered. To where? Here. This town. I found a property. Nothing crazy, just a nice house on the edge of town. Close enough to drive to Wichita when I need to, but far enough to actually be here. Victoria, you don't have to. I want to. She looked at him. I'm not giving up my company, but I can run it from anywhere, and I want to be here. With you. With Sophie. If that's okay. What about your life in the city? Your penthouse? All of that? I'm selling it. Already have a buyer. She smiled. Turns out I don't need 5,000 square feet when what I really want fits in a 2-bedroom house with a leaky faucet. Daniel didn't know what to say. The magnitude of what she was suggesting, what she was offering, was overwhelming. You barely know me, he said finally. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you're kind and patient, and you love your daughter more than anything in the world. I know you risk your life for strangers, and you fix things yourself because you're too proud to ask for help. I know you make me want to be better than I've been. She paused. I know I'm falling in love with your life. Maybe with you too. There it was, out in the open, the thing they'd both been dancing around for weeks. Daniel reached over and took her hand, her fingers intertwined with his, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "The last time I let someone in, she left. She decided this life wasn't enough. I'm not her." "No, you're not." He looked at their joined hands. "You're the woman who almost ran me off the road and then somehow ended up in my kitchen baking cookies with my daughter. Strange how life works." "Yeah." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Yeah, it really is." They sat in comfortable silence, the night settling around them like a blanket. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called out. The fireflies continued their patient dance. "So what happens now?" Victoria asked quietly. Daniel thought about it, about Sophie's laughter in the kitchen, about Victoria's tackle box on his porch, about the way this strange, impossible thing had grown between them, carefully, slowly, but undeniably real. "I guess," he said, "we keep going, one day at a time, one Saturday at a time, and we see where it takes us." Victoria smiled. "I can live with that." She stayed until late that night, and when she finally drove home, Daniel stood on the porch and watched her taillights disappear. The house felt quiet without her, empty in a way it hadn't before. He went to Sophie's room, checked on her sleeping form, pulled her blanket up a little higher. Then he went to his own room and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about impossible things becoming possible. Thinking about second chances and unexpected rescues and the strange ways the universe brings people together. Thinking that maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change in ways he'd never imagined. And for the first time in a long time, the thought didn't scare him. It felt like hope. The hope Daniel felt that night carried him through the next few weeks. But it was tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. August brought heat that sat heavy on the Kansas plains, and with it came complications neither of them had fully prepared for. Victoria's announcement that she was relocating spread through town faster than Daniel expected. By Monday morning, everyone seemed to know. The looks at the grocery store shifted from curious to judgmental. "Mrs. Henderson stopped him at the post office with thinly veiled concern. "Daniel, honey, I'm just wondering if you've really thought this through. A woman like that, with all that money, settling down here, it doesn't make sense." "Maybe it doesn't have to make sense to anyone but us," Daniel replied, more sharply than he intended. Mrs. Henderson's expression softened with something that looked like pity. "I just don't want to see you get hurt, or Sophie. That little girl's been through enough." The words stuck with him all day, nagging like a splinter he couldn't quite reach. That evening, when Victoria showed up with Chinese takeout and a new book for Sophie, Daniel found himself watching her differently, looking for signs that this was temporary, that she'd wake up one morning and realize she'd made a terrible mistake. "You're quiet tonight," Victoria said after Sophie had gone to bed. They were on the porch again, their usual spot, but the easy comfort felt strained. "Just thinking." "About?" Daniel took a long breath. "About what happens when you get bored." Victoria set down her iced tea. "Bored?" "With this, with the small-town routine, with the same creek every Saturday and the same dinner conversations and the same everything. You're used to excitement, Victoria, boardrooms and deals and things that matter on a big scale. How long before this starts feeling like a cage?" "Is that what you really think?" Her voice was calm, but he could hear the hurt underneath. "That I'm just playing house? That this is some kind of phase? I think you almost died and it scared you. I think you're searching for something and you found us and we feel safe and simple and uncomplicated. But life isn't always simple. And I need to know—" He stopped, struggling with the words. "I need to know that you're not going to wake up 6 months from now and realize you gave up everything for something that doesn't actually make you happy." Victoria stood up and walked to the porch railing, her back to him. For a long moment, she didn't speak. When she did, her voice was tight. "You want to know what scared me when that car was sinking? It wasn't dying. It was the realization that I had nothing worth living for. No one who'd actually miss me beyond what I could do for them professionally. I went to my father's funeral 3 years ago, and you know how many people came? Hundreds. And you know how many of them actually knew him? Maybe 5. The rest came because he was Richard Langford, because knowing him meant something for their careers." She turned to face Daniel. "I don't want that to be my funeral. I don't want to die and have people show up because of what I built instead of who I was. And yes, maybe almost drowning triggered something. But it triggered the truth, Daniel. The truth that I've been empty for years, and I didn't even know it until I sat in your kitchen and watched you make spaghetti with your daughter. Victorious, I'm not bored. I'm not playing house. I'm trying to build something real for the first time in my adult life. And it's terrifying because I don't know how to do it. But I'm here. I keep showing up. What more do I have to do to prove that? Before Daniel could answer, headlights swept across the driveway. A car he didn't recognize pulled up, expensive, black, with tinted windows. Victoria's expression changed immediately, her entire posture shifting into something defensive. "Who's that?" Daniel asked. "My brother." She said it like a curse. "I didn't know he was coming." The man who stepped out of the car was younger than Victoria, maybe mid-30s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. He had the same sharp features as his sister, but none of her warmth. His eyes swept over the house, the yard, Daniel's truck, with unconcealed disdain. "Victoria." He didn't smile. "You've been avoiding my calls." "I've been busy, Marcus." "Clearly." His gaze landed on Daniel with cold assessment. "You must be the local hero I've been hearing about." Daniel stood up. "Daniel Carter." Marcus Langford, Victoria's younger, more sensible brother. He didn't offer his hand. "We need to talk, Vic. Alone. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Daniel." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Fine. The board is concerned. You've been delegating responsibilities, missing meetings, and now we hear you're planning to relocate to the middle of nowhere. They want to know if you're still capable of running the company." The company is running perfectly well." "Is it?" "Because the Henderson acquisition fell through, the fiber optic expansion is behind schedule, and you missed the quarterly review with our investors." "I sent my team. They're perfectly capable." "They're not you." Marcus stepped closer. "You built this company, Victoria. It's your vision, your leadership. You can't just abandon it because you're having some kind of crisis." "I'm not abandoning anything. I'm choosing to live my life differently." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Live your life? You mean play house with—" He gestured toward Daniel and the house. "With this? You're a billionaire, Victoria. You have responsibilities, employees who depend on you, shareholders who trust you. You can't just throw it all away for some fantasy of simple living." Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. "Maybe you should leave." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You came here to insult your sister's choices. You're not interested in talking. You're interested in controlling. So maybe it's time for you to go." Marcus turned to him fully, his expression cold. "You have no idea what you're talking about. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when someone comes to my house and disrespects the people in it." "Your house?" Marcus looked around again. "You mean this shack that's probably worth less than my car? You really think you're good enough for her? You really think this—" He waved his hand dismissively. "This poverty fantasy is going to last? Marcus, that's enough." Victoria's voice was sharp as broken glass. "No, it's not enough. Someone needs to say it. You're throwing away everything you've built for what? A man who delivers farm supplies? A ready-made family playing in a creek? Wake up, Victoria. This isn't you." "You don't know who I am," Victoria said quietly. "You never have. I know you're making a mistake that will cost you everything." "Then let me make it. It's my life." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "The board is voting next week on whether to remove you as CEO. They're calling it a mental health leave, but we both know what it really is. If you want to keep the company you built from nothing, you need to come back. Now. Not next month. Not after you've played house a little longer. Now." The words fell like stones. Victoria's face went pale. "They can't do that." "They can and they will. You're acting erratically, missing meetings, relocating on a whim. They have grounds." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Come back, Vic. Come back before you lose everything." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll lose the company. The board will install new leadership. Everything you've spent 15 years building will be gone. All because you couldn't let go of some rescue fantasy." He looked at Daniel one more time, his expression a mixture of pity and contempt, then walked back to his car. "Think about it," he called before getting in. "You have until Friday to decide." The engine started. The headlights swept across them one more time. Then he was gone, leaving nothing but dust and the weight of his words. Victoria stood frozen on the porch. Daniel reached for her, but she stepped away. Don't. Victoria? He's right. Her voice was hollow. I've been ignoring the company, delegating things I should be handling, telling myself it's fine when it's not. You said your team was capable. They are, but the company is mine, my responsibility, and I've been running away from it. You haven't been running away. You've been trying to have a life. Victoria laughed bitterly. A life, right. Playing house like Marcus said, pretending I can be someone I'm not. That's not what this is, isn't it? She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Be honest, Daniel. What am I doing here? I don't belong in this world. I don't know how to bake cookies without burning them. I can barely cast a fishing line. I'm trying to fit into a life that isn't mine, and it's costing me everything I actually built. So what are you saying? She wrapped her arms around herself. I'm saying Marcus is right. I have to go back. I have to save the company. You can save the company and still come back here. You said yourself you can run it from anywhere. I thought I could, but clearly I was wrong. The board needs me there, active, present, not delegating from a small town an hour away. Her voice cracked. I can't lose the company, Daniel. It's everything I am. Is it? Or is it just everything you've used to define yourself because you were too afraid to be anything else? The words came out harsher than he intended. Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but you're standing here telling me you have to choose between your company and this us, and I'm asking if that's really true or if you're just scared. Of course I'm scared. The words burst out of her. I'm terrified. I'm terrified that I'm going to wake up one day and realize I gave up everything for a fantasy. That you're going to wake up and see me for what I really am. A woman who doesn't know how to be normal, who doesn't fit here, who's trying so hard to be something she's not that she's destroying everything she actually is. You think I don't see that? Daniel stepped closer. You think I don't know you're struggling, that you burn cookies and tangle your fishing line, and sometimes you look at my house like you're not sure how you ended up here? I see all of it, Victoria, and I'm still here. I'm still asking you to stay. But for how long? How long before you see what Marcus sees, that I don't belong here, that I'm just a billionaire playing at poverty because I had a near-death experience? I don't see poverty. I see my life. And it was enough before you came. And it'll be enough after if you decide to leave. But it's better with you in it. Sophie's better with you in it. We're better. Victoria's tears spilled over. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to do it. What if I choose wrong? Then you choose wrong. But at least you'll have chosen something real instead of something safe. She looked at him for a long moment, her face illuminated by the porch light, tears tracking down her cheeks. Then she shook her head. I need time. I need to think. Victoria, please, I need time. She walked to her car and Daniel didn't stop her, didn't chase after her or make grand declarations. He just stood on his porch and watched her leave, the same way he had that first Saturday, except this time his chest felt hollow. The next few days passed in painful silence. Victoria didn't call, didn't text. Sophie asked about her every evening. Where's Victoria? Is she coming for dinner? Not tonight, Princess. Is she sick? No, she's just busy with work. But she promised we'd go fishing Saturday. She promised. I know, we'll see. By Thursday, Daniel was starting to believe she wasn't coming back, that Marcus had won, that the pull of her company and her old life had been stronger than whatever she'd found here. He tried to tell himself it was for the best, that they'd been fooling themselves thinking this could work, that people from different worlds didn't just merge their lives together because of a fishing trip and some burnt cookies. But then Friday evening arrived, and with it came a storm. It rolled in from the west, the way summer storms do on the plains, fast and violent, turning the sky black and angry. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder shook the house. Sophie was scared, huddled on the couch with Mr. Whiskers and Rosie, watching the lightning with wide eyes. It's okay, Daniel soothed, sitting beside her. It's just a storm. It'll pass. I don't like the loud noises. I know. Want me to read you a story? Before Sophie could answer, there was a knock at the door, hard and urgent. Daniel's heart jumped. He knew who it was before he even opened the door. Victoria stood on his porch, soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, rain dripping from her clothes. She looked like she'd been standing outside for a while. "Can I come in?" Her voice was barely audible over the rain. Daniel stepped aside. She walked in, leaving puddles on his floor, shivering. Sophie gasped. "Victoria, you're all wet." "I am." Victoria tried to smile. "I was waiting outside, trying to figure out what to say." "How long have you been out there?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. 20 minutes? Half an hour?" She wiped water from her face with shaking hands. "I went to the board meeting today." Daniel's stomach dropped. "And?" "I told them I wasn't stepping down as CEO, that the company was mine and I'd run it the way I saw fit, including from wherever I chose to live. I told them if they wanted to remove me, they'd have to vote me out, and I'd fight them every step of the way." "What did they say?" "They voted." Victoria's voice was steady despite her shaking. "I won. Barely. But I won. The company is still mine." Relief flooded through Daniel, but it was complicated by confusion. "Then why do you look like someone died?" "Because I had to make them a compromise. I have to be in Wichita 3 days a week, Tuesday through Thursday, present in the office, running meetings, managing projects directly. The other 4 days I can work remotely, but those 3 days are non-negotiable." "Okay. That's manageable. Wichita's only an hour away. It means I can't be here every day. It means missing some dinners, some bedtimes. It means Sophie might wake up and I won't be here. It means..." Her voice broke. "It means I can't give you everything you deserve. Everything she deserves. I'm asking you to accept a part-time version of this, and I know that's not fair." Daniel looked at Sophie, who was watching Victoria with concern. Then he looked back at Victoria, standing in his living room, dripping wet and trembling, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "Come here," he said quietly. "Daniel, come here." She took a hesitant step forward, then another. Daniel closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, not caring that she was soaking wet, not caring about anything except that she was here. "You fought for this," he said into her hair. "You stood up to your board and your brother and you fought for this. For us. But it's not enough. I can't be here all the time. I can't..." "Stop." Daniel pulled back just enough to look at her face. "Nothing about this has been conventional. Why should we start now? So you're here 4 days a week instead of 7. So you have to work Tuesdays through Thursdays in Wichita. We'll figure it out. That's what people do when they care about each other. They figure it out." "Are you sure? Because if this is too complicated, if it's too much..." "Victoria." He waited until she met his eyes. "I watched you almost drown in Willow Creek. I pulled you out, and I thought that was the end of our story. But you kept coming back. You kept showing up, even when it was hard, even when you weren't good at it, even when your whole family and your entire board thought you were crazy. You kept coming back. So yeah, I'm sure. If you can fight for this, the least I can do is meet you halfway." Victoria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I don't know how to do this, any of this. I'm going to mess up so many times." "Then you'll mess up. We all do. I burnt dinner last Tuesday. Sophie put her shoes on the wrong feet this morning and didn't realize until lunchtime. We're not looking for perfect. We're just looking for real." "Real," Victoria repeated. "I can do real." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Sophie's voice piped up from the couch. "Does this mean you're staying?" Victoria turned to look at her, and Daniel watched something shift in his daughter's expression. Hope mixed with fear, the look of a child who'd learned not to count on things lasting. "Not all the time," Victoria said honestly, walking over to kneel in front of Sophie. "I have to work in the city 3 days a week, but the rest of the time I'll be here, if that's okay with you." "What about fishing?" "Still fishing. Every Saturday that I can. I promise." "Even when it rains?" Victoria smiled. "Especially when it rains." Sophie considered this seriously. Then she held out her pinky. "Promise?" Victoria hooked her pinky with Sophie's. "Promise." "Okay, you can stay." Just like that. The simple acceptance of a 6-year-old who hadn't yet learned to make things complicated. Daniel found towels and dry clothes, one of his old sweatshirts and sweatpants that were comically large on Victoria, but at least were warm. She changed in the bathroom while he made tea, and when she came back out, Sophie had saved her a spot on the couch. They sat together while the storm raged outside, drinking tea and hot chocolate, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Eventually, Sophie fell asleep between them, her head on Victoria's lap, Rosie clutched to her chest. "She trusts you," Daniel said quietly. "I know. It terrifies me." "Good. It should." Victoria ran her fingers gently through Sophie's hair. "What if I let her down?" "Then you apologize and do better next time. That's parenting. That's relationships. That's life." "Your ex-wife left. You know what that did to Sophie. What if I—" "You're not her," Daniel said it firmly. "You're not making promises you don't intend to keep. You're not pretending to want something you don't. You fought your entire board to be here. That means something." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "My mother left when I was 12, just walked out one day. Left me and Marcus with my father, who threw himself into building his business because it was easier than dealing with 2 kids. I swore I'd never be like either of them, never abandon anyone, never choose business over people. And then I spent 15 years doing exactly what my father did, building an empire and calling it success. But you're here now." "I'm here now," she agreed. "Sitting on a couch in borrowed sweatpants with a sleeping 6-year-old in my lap and a man who saved my life drinking tea next to me. My therapist would have a field day with this." "You have a therapist?" "Started seeing one last week. Figured if I'm going to do this, really do this, I should probably deal with some of my issues first." Daniel smiled. "That's very adult of you." "I'm trying." She looked at him over Sophie's sleeping form. "I know this is messy. I know it's complicated. I know I'm probably going to be terrible at balancing everything, and you're going to have to be patient with me, and there will be times when I'm stressed and snappy and forget things. Victoria." "What?" "Stop catastrophizing. We'll take it one day at a time, one Saturday at a time. That's all we can do." She leaned her head back against the couch. "One day at a time. Starting with getting this kid to bed." Daniel carefully picked up Sophie, who stirred but didn't wake. "You staying tonight?" Victoria hesitated. "Is that okay? I don't want to assume—" "You can take my bed. I'll sleep on the couch. I'm not kicking you out of your bed." "Then we'll both sleep on the couch." "Daniel, this couch is barely big enough for one person." "Then I guess we'll be cozy." He carried Sophie to her room while Victoria gathered the teacups and carried them to the kitchen. When he came back, she was washing the dishes, and the sight of it, this billionaire at his sink, wearing his clothes, washing his dishes while a storm raged outside, made his chest tight. She turned and caught him watching. "What?" "Nothing. Just, this is nice." "Doing dishes? You being here, in my kitchen, in my clothes, in my life." Victoria set down the dish and dried her hands. She walked over to him and they stood in the kitchen with the storm outside and the quiet house around them and the weight of everything they'd said tonight between them. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. But I want this. I want you. I want Sophie. I want Saturday fishing trips and burnt cookies and sitting on your porch watching fireflies." "Then stay." "I am. 3 days in Wichita, 4 days here, starting next week." "Okay." "Okay." They stood there for another moment. Then Victoria rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft and tentative and tasted like tea and rain and promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "So, about this couch situation," Daniel laughed. "It's really not big enough for 2 people. I guess one of us is sleeping on the floor then. Or we could just share my bed like adults." "Daniel Carter, are you propositioning me?" "I'm suggesting we sleep in a bed instead of on furniture designed for sitting. Anything else you read into that is on you." They ended up in his bed, fully clothed, lying on top of the covers with a respectful distance between them. Outside, the storm was finally easing, the thunder growing more distant, the rain softening to a steady patter. "Daniel?" Victoria's voice was quiet in the darkness. "Yeah?" "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Thank you for taking it." She reached across the space between them and found his hand. Their fingers intertwined, and Daniel felt something settle in his chest. something that felt a lot like peace. This wasn't how he'd imagined his life going, falling for a billionaire who'd almost run him off the road, building a family with someone from a completely different world, navigating complicated schedules and board meetings, and the judgment of a small town. But Sophie was safe in her room, and Victoria was beside him, and outside the storm was passing, the way storms always did. Tomorrow would bring new complications. Next week would bring the reality of their arrangement. The future held 1,000 uncertainties. But tonight, they had this. And for now, that was enough. The arrangement worked better than Daniel expected, and worse than Victoria hoped. Those first few weeks of her new schedule were an adjustment for all of them, full of growing pains and small victories that felt larger than they should have. Tuesday mornings became routine. Victoria would wake early, kiss Sophie goodbye while she was still half asleep, and drive to Wichita before the sun fully rose. She'd return Thursday nights, usually exhausted, carrying her laptop bag and takeout from whatever restaurant she'd grabbed on the way. Friday through Monday, she was theirs, present, engaged, learning how to be part of their daily rhythm. Sophie adapted quickly, the way children do. She stopped asking why Victoria had to leave and started counting down the days until she came back. She made a calendar with stickers, marking off each day, putting gold stars on the Thursdays when Victoria would return. Daniel adapted more slowly. He'd spent 6 years being the only parent, making every decision, handling every crisis. Sharing that responsibility felt foreign. Trusting someone else with Sophie's heart felt dangerous. But Victoria showed up. Every week. Every Thursday night. Even when she was exhausted from board meetings and investor calls and the 1,000 demands of running a billion-dollar company, she showed up. September arrived with cooler mornings and the promise of fall. Sophie started first grade, nervous about her new teacher and the bigger kids on the playground. Victoria took a personal day to be there for the first day of school, standing with Daniel outside the classroom, watching Sophie find her desk. "She looks so small," Victoria whispered. "She's growing up," Daniel said, feeling the bittersweet truth of it. Too fast. They stood together until Sophie looked back and waved, then walked out to the parking lot where Victoria's car and Daniel's truck sat side by side. "I hate missing these things," Victoria said quietly. "When I'm in Wichita, wondering what she's doing, if she needs help with homework, she's fine, we're fine, this is working." "Is it, really?" Daniel leaned against his truck. "You want the truth?" "Always." "It's hard. I won't lie about that. There are nights when Sophie asks why you can't just stay all the time. Mornings when I wish I could talk to you about something and you're 3 hours into a meeting. But it's working because you make it work. You call every night, you remember to ask about her spelling test, you send her pictures of the birds you see outside your office window. You're present even when you're not here." Victoria's eyes were bright. "I'm trying." "I know. We all see it." That afternoon, Victoria got a call from Marcus. Daniel only heard her side of the conversation, but he could fill in the blanks from her increasingly sharp responses. "No, I'm not coming to the merger meeting because it's Sophie's first day of school. I have a team handling it, Marcus. They're perfectly capable. I don't care what the investors think. Then they can think that, no, actually this conversation is over." She hung up and stood there, breathing hard. "He doesn't get it," she said finally. "He doesn't understand why I'd choose a first day of school over $100 million merger. Do you?" She looked at him. "Yeah, I really do. For the first time in my life, I actually do." The town continued to talk, but gradually the gossip shifted from scandal to reluctant acceptance. "Mrs. Chen," declared Victoria, "good for Daniel and that sweet girl." Old Joe stopped making suggestive comments and started asking Victoria's opinion on fishing lures. Even Mrs. Henderson softened after Victoria showed up at the church bake sale with 3 dozen cookies that Sophie had helped make. "They're a little burnt on the bottom," Victoria admitted. Mrs. Henderson took one, tasted it, and smiled. "Adds character. You're learning." But not everyone was convinced. One Saturday in late September, Daniel and Victoria took Sophie to the town festival. It was the kind of small-town event Victoria had probably never attended before. Pie contests and 3-legged races and a dunk tank featuring the fire chief. They were watching Sophie try to win a goldfish at the ring toss when a woman approached. Daniel recognized her immediately, Jennifer Hartman, his ex-wife's cousin. They'd managed to avoid each other since Sophie was 2. Daniel! Jennifer's smile was tight. I heard you had a new girlfriend. Didn't believe it until now. Jennifer. Daniel kept his voice neutral. This is Victoria. Victoria, Jennifer. The famous Victoria Langford. Jennifer's eyes swept over Victoria with barely concealed judgment. I've been reading about you online, quite the transformation from tech CEO to small-town girlfriend. I'm still a CEO, Victoria said evenly. I just choose to spend my personal time here. How noble, playing mommy to someone else's kid. Jennifer's smile turned sharp. Tell me, how long do you think this little experiment will last? Another month? 2? Before you get bored and move on to your next charity project? Daniel stepped forward. That's enough. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You already had one woman walk away from that little girl. You really want to put her through it again with someone who's even less likely to stick around? You don't know anything about me, Victoria said, and there was steel in her voice now. You don't know what I want or what I'm willing to sacrifice for it. Sacrifice? Jennifer laughed. You're a billionaire playing house. What exactly are you sacrificing? My privacy? My reputation in certain circles? The respect of my brother and half my board members who think I've lost my mind? 3 years of carefully built business relationships with people who don't understand why I'd choose a small town over New York or San Francisco. Sleep. Because I'm driving back and forth to Wichita 3 days a week. The life I spent 15 years building because it turned out to be empty. Jennifer's smile faltered. That sounds very rehearsed. It's the truth. And honestly, I don't care if you believe me. I don't care what this town thinks. I care about Sophie, and I care about Daniel, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll see. Jennifer's voice was cold. Talk to me in 6 months when the novelty wears off. She walked away, leaving tension in her wake. Sophie had won her goldfish and came running over, oblivious to what had just happened. Look, I got one. Can we name him Sparkles? Sparkles is a perfect name, Victoria said, her voice only slightly strained. That night, after Sophie was asleep with Sparkles in his bowl on her nightstand, Victoria sat on the porch with her head in her hands. She's right, she said quietly. No, she's not. She is. I am playing house. I don't know what I'm doing. I burnt dinner twice this week. I forgot about Sophie's library book and she couldn't check out a new one. I missed her call Tuesday night because I was in a meeting that ran late. I'm terrible at this. Daniel sat down beside her. You know what you did when you forgot the library book? Felt awful about it. You drove to the library the next day and got her 3 new books. You know what you did when you missed her call? You called back at 10 p.m. and talked to her for half an hour about her day even though you were exhausted. You're not terrible at this. You're learning. That's what we're all doing. But what if Jennifer's right? What if I do get bored? What if this stops being enough? Do you feel bored? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. No, I feel challenged. I feel like I'm constantly failing at small things I should know how to do. But I'm not bored. If anything, I'm more engaged than I've ever been in my life. Then that's your answer. October brought cooler weather and the kind of golden light that made everything look like a painting. Victoria's house on the edge of town was finally finished, a modest 3-bedroom that she decorated simply with input from Sophie on color choices for the guest room. But she still spent most of her time at Daniel's house, preferring the lived-in warmth to her own empty rooms. I don't understand why you bought it if you're never there, Daniel said one evening, because I needed to make a commitment, to prove to myself that I wasn't just visiting, that this is real and permanent and mine. She smiled. But yeah, my house feels like a hotel. This feels like home. You could just move in here. The words hung in the air between them. They'd been dancing around the idea for weeks, but neither had actually said it out loud. Are you asking me to move in? Victoria's voice was careful. I'm saying you're here every night anyway. Your toothbrush is already in the bathroom. You have a drawer in my dresser. Sophie calls your house Victoria's other house, like it's just an extension of ours, so yeah, maybe it's time to make it official. That's a big step. It is. And if you're not ready, I'm ready, Victoria said it quickly, like she was afraid she'd lose her nerve if she waited. I'm terrified, but I'm ready. If you're sure. If Sophie's sure. Let's ask her. They sat Sophie down the next evening and explained it as simply as they could. Victoria would move her things from her house to theirs. She'd be there every night she wasn't in Wichita. They'd all live together as a family. Sophie listened seriously, her 6-year-old face thoughtful in a way that made her seem older. "So Victoria would be here all the time?" Sophie asked. "Like a real family?" "Like a real family," Daniel confirmed. "If that's what you want." Sophie looked at Victoria. "And you won't leave? Like my first mommy did?" Victoria's face crumpled slightly, but she held it together. "Sophie, I can't promise that nothing will ever change, but I can promise that I'm choosing to be here. I want to be part of your family, and I'm going to do everything I can to be the best version of that I can be. But what if you get tired of us?" "I won't." "How do you know?" Victoria thought about it. "Have you ever had a favorite book? One you read over and over?" Sophie nodded. "The one about the bear." "And does it get boring, reading it again and again?" "No, I always like it. That's how I feel about being here, about being with you and your dad. It doesn't get boring, it just gets better because I notice new things each time." Sophie considered this. Then she stood up and walked over to Victoria, studying her face with that direct, unfiltered gaze that children have. "Okay," Sophie said finally. "You can stay. But if you're going to be here all the time, you have to learn to make pancakes without burning them." Victoria laughed, relief and joy mixing together. "Deal!" They moved her in over the next 2 weeks. It wasn't much. Victoria had always traveled light, and most of her expensive possessions stayed in storage or her other house. What came to Daniel's place were clothes and books, and the small personal items she'd accumulated. A coffee maker that actually worked properly. Photographs from the past few months, Sophie at the creek, the 3 of them at the festival, Victoria and Daniel on the porch at sunset. The house absorbed her presence like it had been waiting for it. Her shoes by the door next to theirs, her jacket on the hook, her voice in the morning, helping Sophie get ready for school. November arrived with frost on the windows and the first whispers of winter. Daniel's birthday fell on a Tuesday, one of Victoria's Wichita days. He'd accepted that she wouldn't be there, had told her not to worry about it. But Tuesday evening, there was a knock at the door. Victoria stood on the porch with a cake that was slightly lopsided and obviously homemade. Sophie bounced beside her, barely able to contain her excitement. "Surprise?" they shouted together. "I thought you had meetings all day," Daniel said. "I did, but I rescheduled the afternoon ones. Marcus was furious, but I don't care." Victoria held up the cake. "Sophie and I made this. It's probably terrible, but we tried." It was terrible. The frosting was uneven, the layers slightly crooked, the flavor a bit off. It was perfect. They ate it anyway, laughing at how bad it was, and Daniel couldn't remember a birthday that meant more. The week before Thanksgiving, Sophie came home from school quiet. She picked at her dinner, barely responded to Victoria's questions about her day. After she went to bed, Daniel found her awake, staring at the ceiling. "What's wrong, princess?" "Emma asked if Victoria was my mom now." Daniel's heart clenched. "What did you say?" "I said I don't know. Is she?" "What do you want her to be?" Sophie was quiet for a long time. "I want her to be my mom, but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "That if I call her mom, she'll leave, like my first mom did." Daniel sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Your first mom leaving wasn't your fault, and it wasn't because you called her mom. Sometimes people leave because of things inside them, not because of anything we did." "But what if Victoria leaves too?" "She might. People don't come with guarantees, sweetheart. But Victoria has chosen to be here, even when it's hard. She moved her whole life to be with us. That means something." "Do you think she wants to be my mom?" "I think you should ask her." The next evening, Sophie did. They were making dinner together, spaghetti, which had become a weekly tradition, when Sophie looked up at Victoria and said, "Can I call you Mom?" Victoria's hand stilled on the pot she was stirring. Her eyes found Daniel's across the kitchen, wide and uncertain. She stopped, took a breath. "Sophie, that's a really big thing. Are you sure? Emma says you're my mom because you live with us and take care of me and do mom things. But I wanted to ask first." Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level. "I would be honored if you called me Mom, but only if you're comfortable with it. There's no rush. You can call me Victoria until you're ready, or forever if that's what feels right." But what do you want? I want whatever makes you happy. Sophie thought about it. I think I want to try calling you Mom, but just sometimes, to see how it feels. That sounds perfect. The first time Sophie actually said it, 3 days later, asking, Mom, can you help me with my homework? Victoria had to excuse herself to the bathroom. Daniel found her there 5 minutes later, crying. Happy tears, she said, wiping at her eyes. I swear. I know. She called me Mom. I heard. I never imagined I'd have this. Daniel pulled her close. Neither did I. December brought snow and Christmas preparations, and the kind of chaos that comes with a 6-year-old who believes in magic. Sophie's list for Santa was extensive and creative. Victoria threw herself into the holiday with an enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. I've never really celebrated Christmas, she admitted while untangling string lights. My family was always traveling or working. We'd exchange expensive gifts, but there was no tree, no cookies, no traditions. Well, now you have all of that, Daniel said. Maybe too much of it. Victoria had indeed gone overboard. The house looked like a Christmas store had exploded in it. But Sophie was in heaven, and watching Victoria discover holiday traditions through his daughter's eyes was worth the clutter. On Christmas Eve, after Sophie was asleep and they'd assembled the bicycle she'd asked for, Daniel and Victoria sat by the tree with hot chocolate. I need to ask you something, Victoria said quietly. Daniel's stomach tightened. Okay. How would you feel about me adopting Sophie? The words hung in the air. Daniel set down his mug carefully. You want to adopt her? I want to be her mother. Legally, officially. I want her to be mine the way she feels like mine already. But I know that's huge and I know it's asking a lot. And if you're not ready... Yes, Victoria blinked. Yes? Yes, I think Sophie would love that. I think it would give her the security she needs. The knowledge that you're not just here temporarily, that you're choosing her permanently. You don't want to think about it? I've been thinking about it for weeks. I was just waiting for you to be ready. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. I love her so much. I love both of you so much. I never knew I could feel this way about anyone. I love you too. It was the first time Daniel had said it out loud, though they'd both felt it for months. Victoria kissed him, tasting like chocolate and tears and promise. So we're really doing this? Building a family? We already have. Christmas morning was chaos and joy and wrapping paper everywhere. Sophie loved her bicycle and the art supplies and every single gift. But her face when Victoria handed her the last present, a small box with a letter inside, was something Daniel would remember forever. Dear Sophie, Victoria read aloud because Sophie was still learning. You asked me if you could call me Mom, and I said yes. But I want to make it official. I want to adopt you, if that's okay with you. That means I'll be your mom legally, forever. What do you think? Sophie looked up with wide eyes. Really? Like, really, really? Really, really? If you want that. Sophie launched herself at Victoria, nearly knocking her over. Yes, 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 yes. Can I tell Emma? Can I tell everyone? You can tell anyone you want. Later, after the excitement had dimmed and Sophie was testing out her new bicycle in the driveway, under Daniel's supervision, Victoria stood at the window watching them. Mrs. Chen appeared from next door with a plate of cookies. She'd become a regular visitor, an unofficial grandmother to Sophie and a friend to them both. You did good, Mrs. Chen said to Victoria. I wasn't sure at first, I'll be honest. Thought maybe you were just playing around, but you proved me wrong. I almost walked away, Victoria admitted. Back in August, when Marcus came and told me I had to choose. But you didn't. No, I chose this, and I'd choose it again every single time. The adoption process took 4 months. There were forms and background checks and home visits and interviews. Sophie had to talk to a counselor who made sure she understood what adoption meant. Victoria had to prove she was committed, that she understood the responsibility. In April, they stood in a courthouse with Mrs. Chen and Old Joe as witnesses. The judge asked Sophie if she wanted Victoria to be her mother. Yes, Sophie said clearly. She already is. We're just making it official. The judge smiled and signed the papers. Just like that, Victoria Langford officially became Sophie's mother. Walking out of the courthouse, Sophie held both their hands swinging between them. We're a real family now, she announced. Like officially official. We were already a real family, Daniel said. I know, but now everyone knows it. May brought the anniversary of that Saturday at Willow Creek, the day Daniel had pulled Victoria from her sinking car. They went back to the same spot, the three of them, with their fishing gear and sandwiches and the easy comfort of people who belong together. I can't believe it's been a year, Victoria said, watching her line drift in the current. She still wasn't great at fishing, but she'd improved. A lot has changed, Daniel agreed. Everything has changed. Victoria looked at him, then at Sophie, who was explaining something to Mr. Whiskers about proper fishing technique. A year ago, I was drowning. Not just in that car, but in my life. I had everything anyone could want and nothing that actually mattered. And now? Now I have everything that matters, and I don't care about the rest. Sophie caught a fish, a decent-sized bass that she insisted was the best fish ever caught by anyone. They celebrated appropriately, took pictures, released it back into the creek. Bye, fish, Sophie called. Tell all your friends about me. That evening, back at the house, Daniel found Victoria in Sophie's room. She was sitting on the bed, looking at the drawings on the walls. The ones Sophie used to draw of just her and Daniel, now including a third figure with dark hair and a big smile. She drew you into our family, Daniel said from the doorway, literally and figuratively. Victoria smiled. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be living in a small Kansas town, co-parenting a 6-year-old, running my company remotely 3 days a week, and happier than I'd ever been, I would have thought they were crazy. Are you happy? She looked at him. Deliriously, exhaustingly, sometimes overwhelmingly, but yes, I'm happy. Me too. Even though I still burn cookies? Especially because you still burn cookies. Victoria stood up and walked over to him. I know this isn't what either of us planned. I know it's messy and complicated and sometimes hard, but I wouldn't change any of it. Neither would I. They stood in the doorway of Sophie's room, listening to her in the kitchen asking Mrs. Chen if fish could dream, and Daniel thought about all the ways life had surprised him. About dusty roads and near collisions and sinking cars and rescue. About second chances and unexpected love and the family you build rather than the one you're born into. Sophie appeared in the hallway. Come on! Mrs. Chen brought pie! They followed her to the kitchen, where Mrs. Chen had indeed brought apple pie. They ate it together at the table, Daniel and Victoria and Sophie and Mrs. Chen, who'd become part of their extended family. They talked and laughed and made plans for next Saturday's fishing trip. Later, after Mrs. Chen had gone home and Sophie was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the porch in their usual spot. The fireflies were out, blinking their patient messages in the darkness. The air smelled like honeysuckle and approaching summer. Do you ever miss it? Daniel asked. Your old life? Victoria considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Everything being about work, about metrics and goals. But I don't miss the emptiness. I don't miss being alone. You're not alone anymore. No, I have a family, a real one. She reached for his hand. I have you, and I have Sophie, and I have Saturday mornings at Willow Creek, and burnt cookies, and PTA meetings, and homework help, and all these small, ordinary, extraordinary things that I never knew I needed. We're pretty ordinary. You're not, though. You saved my life, Daniel. Not just from drowning. You saved me from a life that was killing me slowly, and I didn't even know it. You saved yourself. You made the choice to stay, to fight for this. I just gave you a reason. You gave me everything. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the fireflies dance. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. Closer, in the house behind them, Sophie turned over in her sleep, safe and loved and theirs. So what happens now? Victoria asked softly. We just keep doing this, day by day, year by year? That's the plan. Is that okay? It's perfect. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Although I was thinking, my lease on the Wichita office building is up in September. I could move the whole operation here, build a small office in town, cut down on the commute. Daniel turned to look at her. You'd do that? I'm tired of leaving every Tuesday morning. I'm tired of missing dinners and bedtimes, The company can run from anywhere. Why not here? What about the board? They'll adjust or they won't. I'm not losing my family for board approval. Victoria, I mean it. You and Sophie are my priority. The company comes second. If that means some people don't like it, that's their problem. Daniel pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. You really have changed. You changed me. Both of you. You showed me what actually matters. A year ago, Victoria Langford had been drowning in more ways than one. Now she sat on a porch in a small Kansas town, holding hands with a delivery driver, planning a life that would have seemed impossible then. She'd given up her penthouse and her prestige and the approval of people who measured worth in zeros and decimal points. And in return, she'd gained everything. A daughter who called her mom. A partner who saw her for who she was, not what she had. A home that felt real and warm and lived in. Saturday fishing trips and burnt cookies, and the kind of ordinary happiness she'd spent her whole life thinking wasn't meant for her. Inside the house, Sophie's nightlight glowed softly. Outside, the fireflies continued their ancient dance. And on the porch, a family sat together, imperfect, unconventional, but absolutely real. "Daddy?" Sophie's sleepy voice called from inside. Daniel started to get up, but Victoria stopped him. "I've got her." She went inside, and Daniel heard the soft murmur of voices as Victoria comforted Sophie back to sleep. When she returned, she was smiling. She had a dream about fish again, said they were having a party, and we were all invited. Sounds like Sophie. They settled back into their spots, and the night wrapped around them like a blanket. Tomorrow, Victoria would work from the kitchen table while Sophie did her homework. The day after, they'd all drive to Wichita for a meeting Victoria couldn't miss. The weekend after that, they'd go fishing again, continuing the tradition that had brought them together. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be hard days ahead, arguments and challenges, and moments when the differences in their backgrounds created friction. Victoria would still burn dinner sometimes. Sophie would still have nightmares. Daniel would still worry about money in a way Victoria never would. But they'd face it together, as a family. The one they'd built from an angry confrontation on a dusty road and a desperate rescue from a flooding car. The one that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. "Hey, Daniel," Victoria said quietly. "Yeah? Thank you for diving in after me that day." Daniel smiled in the darkness. "Couldn't just let you drown." "I know, but thank you anyway. For saving my life, for letting me into yours, for giving me a family. Thank you for staying." "I'm not going anywhere." "I know." And he did know. Could see it in the way she'd rearranged her entire life to be here. In the adoption papers that made Sophie legally hers. In the plans she was making to move her company to town. In 1,000 small choices that added up to one big commitment. The stars wheeled overhead. The fireflies blinked their patient messages. And in a small house, in a small Kansas town, a family sat together in the darkness, bound not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by the decision to stay, to try, to build something real out of the wreckage of almost losing everything. Sophie would grow up in this house, secure in the knowledge that she was loved by two parents who chose her every single day. Victoria would build a life that balanced ambition with presence, success with significance. Daniel would share his daughter and his home and his heart with someone who valued them more than any fortune. And somewhere beneath the surface of Willow Creek, a black Mercedes sedan sat rusting in the silt, a monument to the moment everything changed, to the near death that became new life, to the rescue that saved more than one person. "We should get inside," Victoria said eventually. "Early morning tomorrow. 5 more minutes." 5 more minutes, she agreed. They sat for 10 more minutes, then 15. Neither wanted to break the spell of the evening, the perfect ordinariness of it all. When they finally went inside, they checked on Sophie one more time, found her sprawled across her bed with Rosie and Mr. Whiskers, her new fish drawing pinned to the wall above her. In their own room, they got ready for bed with the comfortable rhythm of people who'd learned each other's routines. Victoria set her alarm for the morning. Daniel checked that the doors were locked. They climbed into bed together, and Victoria curled against his side the way she always did. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Both of you. My whole family. We love you back. All the way." Victoria's breathing evened out first. Daniel lay awake a bit longer, thinking about the strange journey that had brought them here. About fate and choice and the thin line between the two. About how close he'd come to not diving into that creek, to just calling for help instead. About how one decision had changed 3 lives completely. Eventually, he slept too. And in the morning, they woke to Sophie jumping on the bed, announcing that it was pancake day and that Mom, Victoria, had promised to try making them without burning them this time. Victoria groaned good-naturedly. "I said I'd try. I didn't promise success." "That's okay," Sophie said generously. "Daddy can help." So they went to the kitchen together, all 3 of them, and made pancakes that were only slightly burnt. They ate breakfast at the table that had become theirs, making plans for the day and the weekend and the summer ahead. And from a dusty roadside argument and a river rescue, from burnt cookies and fishing trips and the courage to choose love over fear, they had built something that money couldn't buy and circumstance couldn't break. A family. A real one. Made not by blood but by the daily decision to show up, to stay, to love, even when it was hard. Outside, the sun rose over the Kansas plains, painting everything gold. Inside, a father and a mother and their daughter sat together in the warm light of morning, exactly where they belonged. Together. Finally, completely, perfectly together.